Welcome back, and a busy edition of Morning Live today. So into our next conversation, and we are joined by Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga, who is of course exactly a month into the job after she was appointed Minister of Transport by President Cyril Ramaphosa. That was last month on the 6th of March. Now she will be discussing the country's transport matters, which of course include the presence of the International Civil Aviation Organization in the country. That happened last week, and they were here and have just concluded their audit of South Africa's Civil Aviation Society systems and of course oversight capabilities. The Minister will also give us an update on what's happening with the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA, and of course other related matters. Now the Department of Transport Minister is Sindisiwe Chikunga, and she is here in studio with me. Thanks so much for joining us, Minister.
Thank you very much, and good morning, South Africa.
So a month into the job, incidentally, congratulations. It's your first time here with us on Morning Live. Congratulations on your appointment. But of course, you're no stranger to this portfolio. You've been around as the Deputy Minister. But how has this first month been? And also, what will you be prioritizing going forward?
It's a very hectic portfolio. It's big. We're responsible for all modes of transport, whether it's aviation, maritime, public transport, road, rail. We're responsible for that. Anything on the road, anything in the sky, anything in the waters, we're responsible for that, safety and security of that. But my priority for sure will be what is happening on our roads. The state of our roads. I think it will be my priority to say how best do we ensure that our roads are refurbished, they are maintained, we build them. I think that will be my first priority. Secondly, it will be our rail sector, to say how do we recover our passenger rail, how do we ensure that we modernize our rail infrastructure, our signaling, and our rolling stock. Of course, we actually manufacturing trains in South Africa, but how do we put them on track so that they can do what they're supposed to do to transport our people? But of course, it will be aviation as well, because we need tourists to come to South Africa. Amongst the priorities of recovering our economy and reconstructing our economy is to actually grow the tourism sector. And tourists can only come to South Africa if we have a very vibrant aviation. And hence we are here very happy to actually inform South Africa that we've done it again with our audit by ICAO. ICAO is a specialized aviation agent of the United Nations that was established in 1944. And we were here last year to say we were actually presiding over the 41st ICAO Assembly. And we actually announced last year that we passed the audit by USA. And here today we're saying ICAO was here for 12 days, grueling audit with something like 950 questions asked to us, and for each one you don't just sit and respond like I'm doing. You have to actually provide a portfolio of evidence for each question. And you can imagine if it is more than 950 questions, you do that as our aviation entity, that is the regulate, but post that then they go to our operators, they will go to state-owned entities, but private sector entities as well. And we really want to extend our appreciation to all those who came to the party and said it's about us now, to the extent that we have improved our rating from 87.3% in 2017. This year we are around, that will be the preliminary results, we are around 92%. And if 92% is not a distinction, a real distinction, then I don't know what a distinction is, Sakina. We are number one as a result in the continent. We are amongst the top 20 in the world. 173 member states of ICAO. If we say in terms of aviation safety, we are amongst the top 20 in the world. For me, that's a good story for South Africa.
It certainly is, but perhaps, the 8%, where did it go? What were some of the drawbacks there?
It will be housekeeping issues. Somebody will say, you could have arranged this sitting like this, and it will be that. But what is critical in the aviation sector is to avoid significant findings. So we don't have any of those. But somebody will say, probably you could arrange this like this, somebody can do it like this. And in the aviation, to get a percentage more, you work for it, a percentage. Now to add 5% onto where we were in 2017, I mean, like I say, more than 950 questions. For each one, you don't just answer, you provide, as the regulator, a portfolio of evidence to say, we're saying this is evidence. And then, of course, they say, fine, you've said that as the regulator, but there are operators who must implement this. Then they go to operators. The operators say, for instance, they will go to AXA and say, where is your runway? They say, this is the runway. We want to see the lights of your runway, if they are the correct ones in terms of what the standards and recommended practices of ICAO stipulate, and your regulations and the regulator said. So they look at that. I'm just making an example.
So great stuff. And as you say, there are, of course, always questions asked by some people. If you look domestically, the South African Civil Aviation Authority and the DA, for example, they've come out to ask or express a concern, as it were, about what's been happening there with the suspension at certain navigation procedures at some of our airports. So can you put that into perspective for us? What exactly is the concern there, and how was it factored into the international audit?
The first thing that is good about that is that the regulator discovers that and it acts. That gives us a plus to the ICAO auditors and the auditors, because it means we have a vibrant regulation and regulator that can take decisions irrespective of who you are. Then, of course, with the ATNS, for instance, on just that one matter, they then had to attend to that so that they actually sign off those procedures so that they are updated. In fact, it was not to say people can't fly, but it was just to say, have you signed off? Have you done what you're supposed to do with those procedures? And the regulator says, for as long as you've not done it on time, then of course I'm penalizing you for that. So you have a very vibrant aviation process and regulator that takes decisions irrespective of who you are, whether you are a state-owned company reporting to the same ministry or private sector company. They just decide and act on that. That keeps us safe when it comes to aviation, because you can't compromise safety in the aviation. When you get into an aircraft, you want to arrive at your destination safe. Anything that happens in the airspace, then of course can actually result in loss of life. So we don't want that in South Africa. So the record that we have when it comes to civil aviation safety of 0% air crashes, it doesn't happen by itself. As a matter of fact, even when I was the deputy minister, I said to them, I want to see this in your APPs as a target and measures put in place to say, how are we going to maintain this? Because we don't want to take it for granted. It has not happened, and therefore it's fine. It doesn't happen by itself. No, it must be because we've put it as a target and we've put measures that we're going to implement to ensure that we maintain that status. So safety, the aviators, they then say, if you want the safest mode of transport, then they say it's aviation. Others, they will argue to say maybe rail is the safest. Others will say, and so on and so forth. But we want that to happen.
So I guess that's a plus then in terms of, the international audit. We did fantastically well, coming in at 92%. But I want to speak to you about the optimization of, our aviation industry and the airlines, for example. If you look at SAA, and I appreciate that that is something that resides with another department, public enterprises, but as the Minister of Transport, who has to have oversight over everything, as you indicated in the beginning, whether it's rail, roads, in the air, what's happening with that Takatso deal? Where are we with regard to that?
I don't think I would want to answer the question about the Takatso deal. all that we are responsible for is to issue the operating license.
But are you not even just a little bit curious as the Minister of Transport? Because in part, you deal with the aviation matters. You know, have the questions not come up in Cabinet about Takatso and what's going on with that deal?
What we deal with is to issue an operating license to SAA. And if SAA, for instance, is regarded as to be a state-owned company, with the state being the majority shareholder, that's the operating license that we issue. If it has to change that, then it actually means that we've got also to change the operating license, and that is a procedure.
I appreciate that, Minister, but I'm asking a slightly different question. I'm asking, have you perhaps had a conversation with Minister Gordhan, as an example, about what's going on? You've issued the license to SAA, but are you not at all concerned about what's happening? Hence I asked, even in Cabinet, when you sit as a collective as ministers, hasn't this particular matter been canvassed further?
I actually had a meeting with the CEO of the acting CEO of SAA, and actually asked as to what is happening within SAA. For many reasons, we enter into agreements with countries, some are reciprocal, and it makes sense if you have a state-owned airline so that it can take some of the routes. And if they don't have aircrafts, for instance, that are able to take those, it concerns you because you don't know how to move on. But of course, then you bring in the private sector-owned airlines. But it works better if you also have. So I had that. On the issues of where they are with regards to that agreement, honestly, on our side, I wouldn't want to get into it that much. I might have my own issues as the Minister of Transport. But all that is required on our side is for them to then come and present to us that this is what we want to see happening. Then we look at that as to whether we can issue an operating license to them or we don't. For now, the operating license for SAA says the state owns the majority shareholder, is the majority shareholder.
I'm going to park it. Let's come to issues that concern you directly as the Minister of Transport. Let's talk PRASA. Yeah. What's going on with PRASA? And of course, you had the Zondo Commission report. With regard to a follow-up on that, in the PRASA sense, where are we?
In fact, one good thing is that we are recovering some of the corridors. We were in Cape Town, for instance, to assess the central line and the phase of that central line. And that has been completed. So we actually were able to be in the train from Kwalanga to Nyanga. And conversing with the commuters there, conversing with them, I was happy to hear somebody says, I have actually been, in the absence of trains, I've been spending something like 1,000 plus for transport. Today I have a ticket which cost me 175 rand. So what it means is that this person, if you want, is saving 800 rand, which she was spending just on transport.
But we know this, Minister. We know that this is the cheapest mode of transport. Yes. We know that this is what services the poorest of the poor in terms of moving them from one space to another. And yet, this particular sector, it was left to literally be run down. In certain spaces, I'm sure some of your corridors are still not open because it was stripped to the bone, literally. And again, at what cost is this happening now? And going back to my initial question, repercussions, you know, who has been held accountable for a lot of the wrongdoing that has happened at PRASA?
In fact, many cases have actually been reported from PRASA, reported to that is the police, the Hawks, and so on and so forth, for them to investigate, for them to take to court. Because you do the investigation, you have cases, then you hand them over to law enforcers for them to take those cases to court. Like they will always say, cases of this nature, Sakina, are not easy. People who are corrupt will not just do it willy-nilly. They do everything to hide what they are doing. So yes, you take it to court, But it is, again, useless to take a case to court that will not stand the test of time. We get excited. So many people have been excited. Next thing, they're out because maybe the case is not as strong as all that. So there is investigation that is taking place. And it is in our interest to see people being arrested and paying these monies that they stole in terms of the Commission's findings.
So to that point, how much has PRASA recovered since the Commission concluded its work?
Honestly, I wouldn't answer that question for now because I didn't check the figures. But I think if we were to get the information from the SIU, from the Hawks, they will actually give us the information on that one. At least I'm a month in it. But I think we're moving towards ensuring that people pay back the money that was stolen from PRASA and from any other state-owned entity that is reporting to us, but and PRASA in particular.
Still, it would seem we are still reporting on some or other shenanigans happening at PRASA, even today. Now you've got the board chairperson, Leonard Ramatlakane, who seems to have moved his family into a PRASA property in Cape Town. So talk to us about that. You know, what is the latest with regard to that?
There's an investigation that was conducted. There is a report now that was put on my table, I think on today's is Thursday, on Tuesday. So it's on my table. And I've actually requested my advisors to look at it so that we can action that. So yes, there's action on that matter. It is unfortunate. It's something that should not have happened, as a matter of fact, because it brings a lot of conflict of interest. If you look at what the board charter is saying, it shouldn't have happened. But we're looking
Which is why we're reporting on it, because we know it shouldn't have happened, and yet it's happening at an entity that one would imagine has been under the spotlight for so many wrongdoings. And as if that is not enough, you're sitting with PRASA, again, with payments that are made to companies that are not worthy or should not have received those monies to begin with. And yes,
that was in the past, Sakina. I think despite what we're talking about the chairperson, but I think the board has done some good job in tracking all those issues and actually try to stop them. I mean, people who are used to stealing, they will always try. But if they know that they will be caught and there will be action taken, then of course others are actually calling us.
But the public's patience has run out, Minister. No. The public does not want to hear the excuses anymore. How does a payment system at PRASA in 2023 still get overridden and monies are diverted to Ms. Chikunga when they're supposed to come to Sakina? And, you know, you have to then follow up, and yet you cannot trace who diverted the payment.
It can actually be traced again.
So has it been traced?
It can be traced.
Has it been traced?
Yes.
So who was responsible for that?
That is why you have a number of executives that were at PRASA who are sitting at home. They're sitting at home.
With full pay?
No.
Have they been suspended without pay?
Some actually have been dismissed. I can tell you now. Some have been dismissed.
So you know the transactions I'm talking about? The two that have been in the media belatedly.
I heard about them in the media, yes.
You heard about them in the media, but...
And I checked about it.
So who has been held responsible for that?
It's being investigated, Sakina. Remember, when it comes to these things, you don't just, because I've read about it, then you, Sakina, you are fired. You've got to investigate, because some of the people, where we acted in a rush, they are back at work. Not because they did not do it, but because they too have a right to go to court and say to court the processes were not followed. And based on technical reasons, the court will say, re-employ this person. And you have to take them. I can refer to quite a number of them. It may not be a number of them, but I can refer to, for instance, the Constitutional Court judgment in 2015. It was scathing on an official. We fired the official. But on the basis of technicalities, went to court and the court said reinstate the person. But the report, the Constitutional Court, judgment, is actually scathing on the official. So how you deal with those issues is as important as acting on them.
Absolutely,
yes.
Fair enough.
So
and I take that
processes,
point.
yes.
I take that point. But what I do not accept, Minister, is the fact that you seem to, at PRASA, be bumbling from one disaster to the next. We were talking about ghost workers, 3,000 ghost workers. And somehow this money is paid into people's accounts, but it goes on for a long time and, you know, nobody catches it until it becomes a story. Now we follow up, now we have to investigate. Now again, money's diverted, millions of rands. You've recovered 15 million of it, but I think there's still about the same amount still that needs to be recovered. So these things shouldn't be happening.
They shouldn't be happening, Sakin. They shouldn't. But as we act on them, we're minimizing them. And that is why we're beginning to see some improvement. That is why we're beginning to see the trains that are being manufactured now being operated, because we've tried our level best to stop these things. But like I said, people who are used, people who are used to stealing, they will still find a way. But
you need to get rid of the people who are stealing, Minister. But we're going to have to leave it there. Department of Transport Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga on matters relating to her department there with us. You can tell us your thoughts at Morning Live SABC.